get started. Let's have pledge allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. At this town hall meeting, we'll get underway at 6:03. Just information meeting for the citizens of Granby from the City Council and Anderson Engineering on a lot of questions and answer, but I'm going to have Anderson Engineering, whoever wants to come first, come up and say something brief to you all, and then we'll go from there. At the end, we'll answer questions that you might have. Appreciate everybody that was able to come out this evening.
Thank you, Ira. Thank you all for coming out tonight. Like Ira said, this is a public hearing to talk about the city's water system and some of the maintenance items and some of the issues that the city's having and some ideas and discussion on, what needs to be done and what the cost would be and so on and so forth that way. My name is Jeff Seville with Anderson Engineering. I'm the office manager for the Monad office. Pat O'Brien is our project engineer. The city got a grant to do a preliminary engineering report for the water system. It's a $30,000 grant. The city applied for it and was able to obtain that. The report is for a complete review of your water system. It basically looks at all aspects of your water system, the current condition, current needs, future needs, and then this report is basically all encompassing, and then we are finishing up that report right now. It'll probably be done next week, I believe, Pat. We have had some meetings with the city and some discussion on some of those maintenance items that need to be addressed. And we had to get some, we had to put a bond issue amount on the election for April to try and help meet some funding requirements for the SRF program, the SRF, which is the State Revolving Fund. Normally how the government funding works is you have to vote a bond issue and get that passed, and then you can apply to their system or to their agency, and then you get in the chute, and depending on how things move along, then you get funding for your project, and that agency has loan forgiveness or grant dollars that we all look at them. And so that, obviously, cities like to leverage their dollars so they can get more bang for their buck rather than just do all loans for a project. Like I said, we're finalizing that report right now. This year they made an exception. If you have a bond issue on the ballot for April, then they will consider that as part of the application process. Normally, like I say, you would be another whole year out before you would be able to do that because we're not to that point yet. So we're basically trying to save a year on timing here. Like I say, we've met with the city and discussed some of the issues with the system and some costs, and the city has made some recommendations and how they would like to proceed. And so the purpose of this meeting is to talk to the community because you guys are the ones that are going to have to vote on these issues, right? We want to let you know what the conditions are, what the problems are, what some of the recommendations are, and try and get as much information out to the people because, the more information that people have, if it's good information, they can make an intelligent decision, and that's what we're looking for in April. We're not trying to make any decisions tonight. We're just trying to explain, where the council's coming from and trying to look at future needs. The problem with maintenance on systems, you're doing it right now in your sewer system. You've got, issues with the sewer and they don't go away, right? You've got to deal with them at some point. Your water system initially was put in 1912. the main part of your system. I don't know how many of you own or operate a Model T, or how many see them driving down the road these days, but I haven't seen one for quite a while. I really enjoy those types of vehicles, but the point being is infrastructure is put in place, and it's in place for a certain amount of time, and at some point, it outlives its usefulness, and you've got to look forward for maintenance and take care of that thing. Pat made a comment on the way down, so in April of 1912, the Titanic stopped, right? So
Whoops.
we're kind of dealing with some of those things, right? We've got a system that has been neglected for a long time. I think the last improvements of any sizable amount on the water was like 40 years ago. I think there's some wells and some tie-in lines and some minor line replacements done. I'm gonna turn the meeting over to Pat. Pat's got some exhibits. I did a little handout for you to kind of easier to follow sometimes than the exhibits because they're small, you can't read them. He's gonna go through his findings and just, like I said, give some information to the citizens so you can make an intelligent decision on April 12th. And we appreciate your input. If you let Pat kind of get through his presentation, and I hope it's not too lengthy, but we'll answer questions and stuff when we get done and see how we can move this thing forward. So, Pat, I'm gonna turn it over to you.
Do you have,
Do
sir?
you have another hand?
Do you have more handouts?
You have some more of those, Jeff? What do you think now?
It's just your stuff here.
Great.
Yeah, and if people can see it.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
You have a couple in front there that doesn't have one also, sir.
I would like to go ahead and put this up
And, oh, I didn't see it back there, Jeannie?
here.
Anybody else need one?
And I'll go ahead and put these two big posters up here, if anybody wants to come and look at them. And I'll leave these here for you people for information.
Thank you.
But they're the same as what's on the handout.
Thank you.
Good job. Good job.
Me.
If you'd have told me, I would have done it for you.
Well, good evening, you all.
Good evening, Pat.
You sit right here.
Part of the world, I can say you all. I have been around a few years, as you can see. And I am a local native of Southwest Missouri. I am a hillbilly and proud of it.
Amen.
I am not some New York City engineer that's come in here and trying to tell you people you gotta do this. I wanna be sensitive to the fact that ultimately, and your council is too, decision is in the hands of the voters. And I want to make it clear that we had a meeting with the council back in December, talked about some problems on the city. They asked us to get involved down here last summer and fall to go ahead and do this study on the preliminary engineering report, which we were not involved when they made the application for the grant on that. And also to assist them in a request to try and get some of this ARPA money that was handed out last year, which was all free money, if there is such a thing in the government. We made an application for a partial project because we were limited in the size of projects we could request from the government last year. Unfortunately, there was tremendous competition in the state of Missouri. I think there were 370 entities, cities, water districts that made application for over 900 and some odd $1 million. The state only had 125 to give out. And they came up with a scoring system, which they developed. Bottom line was only about 10% of the applicants got that free, totally free government money. And unfortunately, Granby, along with every other city that we have worked with in Southwest Missouri, was not successful. There were a few that got some funds. So we tried that aspect first to see if we could get some of that money, and it did not work out. Now, there is indirectly going to be some additional money available this year. It will not be all free. In fact, it won't be even probably a majority free. It'll be a percentage of money that will come from the federal government through a separate program, but it's going to be channeled through the state government, through what they call their state revolving fund for loans for water system improvements. And the way it will work this year, if we make application for our project in a timely fashion, which we're doing, and if the voters approve a bond issue for equal to the total amount, estimated amount of the project as a minimum, then we will be put on the list by the state of Missouri to see if we can obtain funding from them. They won't know for sure who all gets the money and how much they've got till their budget is officially approved. It starts July the 1st. And then it will be about October before then they go through and see how many requests they have, because they may not have enough money for everybody, but we won't know until then. But you gotta start somewhere. And you have to have the bond issue passed before you can even get on their list. So that is why we are having a bond issue in April. And I'll get to more details about that here in a bit. So that's where we are. Now, the program for the loan portion is a very attractive loan in the sense that it is very low interest. They typically charge around 30% of what a commercial lender would charge. Right now, they're saying it's probably going to be about a 1.5% interest. And I don't know where anybody today can go and get a loan for 1.5% on your own. It can be financed for up to 30 years, which will lower your payments. It's like a house mortgage is what it is, folks. You don't build a house by borrowing a little bit of money and build a room at a time. You go in debt for the whole thing, but then you're fixed for many, many years. 30-year loan. It can be prepaid at any time if you get extra funds. The interest rate is locked in. It is not a variable rate, so they can't come down in 3 years from now and interest rates have gone out the window for whatever reason, say, oh, payments are going up. It is a locked-in rate. Okay. Okay. All right. So we met with the council in December. There's basically 2 or 3 real problems in the system. One is, as Jeff mentioned, you've got a lot of old lines in the system, a lot of old, very small, 2-inch or smaller lines in the system. You've got about 28 miles of line in your system, and these are educated guesses, because one of the problems we've had down here, not to cast aspersions, was on previous people who worked for the city, whether it was maintenance people or councils. The records they kept were absolutely not good. We have gone through all the records we can to try and make sure we know as best as we can what's in the ground. Your water operator over here, Mr. Jim, will tell you a lot of it is still not totally known, but we have made the best educated guess we can. And if we do get to the point where we start actually designing, we will do some more exploration to make sure we're only replacing what we think we need to replace, and we won't replace what we don't need to replace. But there again, you've got to start somewhere. Jim gave me 3 sets of old blueprints to pour through of projects that dated, proposed projects that dated all the way back to the 70s and 80s, and it was obvious as he had looked through them before. A lot of the work was apparently never done, and some of the work that was done based upon what he has dug up in the field, wasn't put in the way it was shown. And the last of that work was done in about 1984. The other problems, there's two other problems associated with that. Apparently, they ran newer lines for some of that stuff, paralleling some old 2-inch lines. But once they got the new lines in, they never went back and cut off the old 2-inch lines or tied the services over. So a lot of these 2-inch lines are still in the ground and are leaking. Jim has tried to cut some of them off, and we find out that people are still getting water, because when he cuts one of the lines off, the phone starts ringing. We've got no water. So this project will address all those issues. We'll get rid of all those points of controversy and confusion. Nonetheless, for every gallon of water that you pump out of your well that you are using, you're basically throwing 2.5 gallons away right now. Your lost percentage of water is 70%, not 7%. 70%, and it's been that way for a good number of years. Previous administrations, for whatever reason, chose not to pursue this. For every inspection that this council has had for umpteen years from the Department of Natural Resources in Jeff City, which is the regulatory people that you have to follow their rules in the state of Missouri, and of course they've got a branch office in Springfield. If you go back as far as you can, it tells you, well, your loss and unaccounted for is really getting high and you need to do something. Your loss and unaccounted for is high, and it gets, every report you go back, you can see it just has been building. It's up to over 70% now. So like I said, you do the math, you're using 1 gallon and throwing away 2.5. We say, well, it doesn't cost anything. Well, yeah, it costs to pump it out of the ground, and electricity rates are going up. And it's costing the city more and more money to try and fix leaks. Now, right now, you're getting by, but, you know, it's like anything else. Things, when they age, they tend to start failing, as they say, exponentially and not in a straight line. So what I'm saying is, no, is the world going to end tomorrow if we don't replace these lines? No, you'll limp by some way. Now, your rates are going to have to go up eventually anyway because of higher electric costs, higher pumping costs, more maintenance costs, et cetera, et cetera. So no matter what happens, you're looking at rate increases in the future, okay? But this is an opportunity to hopefully solve those problems and lock in a rate increase for that fix. Now, does that mean there won't be any rate increases in the future because of other increases in operating costs? No. You know, wages go up, materials just to run the system go up. Who would have thought you'd be paying $4 for a carton of eggs, a dozen eggs? So these are real issues that your city has to deal with. So this is an opportunity to fix those and fix them at it's going to seem like a lot of money when I get to that point, and that's why I'm saving that for last. But it's all in a perspective. The other issue you have in your system, which is compounded by the fact that you have leaking lines and lines that are much too small in a lot of places, not everywhere. As the system grew out mostly in that direction, the folks did put in some bigger lines, and you have in some 6-inch lines and some 8-inch line, one section of 8-inch line. Still got a lot of 4-inch lines. You're depending on where you're at in town right now, your pressures can vacillate quite a bit between periods of high demand and low demand. Now, if you're living down in the valley, you probably don't notice that. But if you're living up on the hill, you probably say sometimes, why don't I have any water pressure today? Or this time of the day. If you look at a water system, the pressure doesn't stay the same because the use doesn't stay the same through the day. You typically get 2 peaks, one in the morning that goes way up, it comes down, and then sometime in the evening you get a smaller peak. It's those times what you got to design for, because if not, people are running out of water right when they need it the worst. The other concept is the issue of fire flow protection, fire hydrants. You've got a little over, according to the fire department's records, which are sketchy a bit, but they've got a little over 100 fire hydrants in this community. At least 10% of them don't provide any fire flow at all. Another 20% or so don't provide near what would be considered a desirable fire flow, which is under 500 gallons a minute. And there again, it depends on what time of the day it is, may even be less. You don't have very much fire flow in this community. And you, for all practical purposes, have only one storage tank in the system, and that's the tank out here west of town, out on Tower Road and the B Highway. It's an older tank. It has about 100,000 gallons capacity, and that is not anywhere near equal to your average day demand on the system. The general guideline that DNR prefers, and again, it is not a regulation, I won't say it is, you should have under storage equivalent to 1 day's average day use on your system. Now, you do have this old tank over here, but it hasn't been used for some time. The well has been out of service for a long time. It has major problems. It would take a lot of money to make that well work again, and the problem with the tank over here is it is way below the top because it was built here. You could make it work, but you're going to have to put a lot of money into it, and it just seems ill-advised to put money into that when you do have another newer well on the west side of town, north of the highway, that doesn't have a tank right now. We are proposing to put in a 250,000 gallon elevated storage tank at that location. That will improve pressures, stabilize pressures, and it will do wonders for your fire flow protection in this older part of town. It'll be increased typically by a factor of 2.5 times. So if you had 500 gallons a minute, you're going to be looking at 12 to 1,500, which is a very good number for a city the size of Granby. Again, there is no absolute requirement from the state on exactly how much fire flow you have to have. But of course, part of what impacts your fire property insurance rates is the capacity of the system to deliver water. So we foresee that if we do the whole project, like we said, the insurance folks will come in and examine the water system, and based on that, it would typically be that you could see some relief in your insurance rates, because now the whole thing is not based on your water system. They also look at the fire department and see if it needs some improvements. They also look at your 24-hour dispatch service. But the water system makes up at least half of that evaluation. And right now, I can tell you, you've got very low marks on that. Again, is it an absolute requirement or regulation you have to increase that? No. If you're happy with what you've got, that's fine. The state's not going to come in and shut you down because you're not providing fire flow of a certain amount to certain people. But most communities like to see at least 500 in residentials and prefer 1,000 or better. Commercial areas, 1,500 or so. Right now, in most of your locations, you're nowhere near close to that. If we do the project, you will exceed that in virtually every location in town. Okay. So that is the other thing, back to the storage, and then I'll digress. Right now, your average sales in the city, is about 150,000 gallons a day, plus or minus. You're pumping over 400,000 gallons a day because 2.5 gallons are going out somewhere into the ground. Now you say, how come all that isn't being found? Well, it's a phenomenon of the geology in southwest Missouri. I don't know how many communities I've worked with through the years, and yeah, I've got some years on me, as you can see, where they don't really find that many leaks because it comes out of the pipe, and typically, particularly in these older systems, these aren't major fracture leaks that just all of a sudden it fails and blows out. You start getting these little leaks in the pipe, you get the leaks in the joints, particularly the old cast iron lines, and they start leaking slowly, It's just like in your house. If you've ever seen the commercials about you have a drip of water in your faucet, it's amazing how much water that amounts to in a month. But since it's so slow, typically what happens in communities in southwest Missouri, it migrates down what we call the old ditch line till it finds a crack in the soil, and it goes down and hits the limestone, and there's no telling where it goes. We did a complete rehab for the Theodosia community some years ago. Their loss and unaccounted for, I think, was 50 to 60%, and they had virtually no evidence of leaks on the ground. It was all going down into Bull Shoals Lake. Anyway, so don't blame your operating people that they can't find these leaks and fix them. They'd spend more money trying to find these leaks, and they just as well go ahead and put in a new pipe. I mean, do you agree with that? Okay. I just wanted to give you some background to that. Now, obviously, if we can fix these pipes, get them replaced, I should say, we should be able to bring down that daily 400,000 gallons substantially, so the new tower plus the tower you have over here would easily give you well over a day's average use. It's almost there right now if we put it in with all the leaks. But if we can fix the leaks, what's the point of putting in a great extra big tower, which you don't really need? It's just more money. To really get to that right now, if you don't fix any of these leaks, you're looking at probably twice the size of a tower. Well, that just doesn't make, again, that's not a good investment of your money. You try to put your money where you can get the most bang for the buck, as we say. Now, we had already identified some of these options as the amount of renewals the city might want to do. We met with them in December, and this is, and Ira and Lana and all the council people can confirm this. We gave them options to consider, and we gave them ramifications. They, on their own, decided that they thought the best approach was go for the comprehensive solution and try and do a whole fix on the system and not try and piecemeal it in. What I'm trying to say is us as the engineers didn't come down here and try and convince them you have to go for this. So what I want to say is I think the council showed a great amount of foresight in going for this. And I know that when it gets to the amount of money involved, they're going to get a lot of heat from a lot of people. They're going to say, we can't afford this. But you got to remember, folks, this locks it in, and your rates right now compared to a lot of communities are pretty low. You may not believe that, but they are about $30 a month for a 5,000 gallon user, which is the yardstick that the state makes us compare with. Okay, so what's in the project? I will refer now to my cheat sheet, and you have copies of this, okay? Okay, we talked about the construction of the new 250,000 gallon tank on your map and on this display. It's this big old dot right out here. And that's where well number 3 is in your system. Well number 2 is down here with its tower. Well 3 is here, okay? We would also put in a standby electrical generator set at that time on that well. So if you have a widespread electric outage that affects everything in town, you've still got power to pump your well. 68 to roughly 70,000 feet of line would be replaced in the system. And if you look at your map and on here, this is the heavy black line. Now you'll notice the concentration of it is in the older part of town because that's where a lot of this older stuff is. Some of these lines in here though are 2-inch lines that are way too small. Okay. Here, this line there, and some lines over here, this line up here, and this line going east. Those are all 2-inch lines, need to be replaced anyway. They're leaking most of them. And those that aren't are so small that again, that's really affecting your pressure at the end of those lines. So we put the tower in. Now embedded in this is a partial renewal, but most of these lines, okay, 95% of these lines plus would be 6-inch lines, 6-inch size. Why do we go with 6 inch? 2 or 3 reasons. One, the difference in volume that you can get between a 4-inch pipe and a 6-inch pipe is tremendous. It's roughly twice the capacity, more than twice the capacity of a 6-inch line compared to a 4-inch line. And the incremental cost is not that much more between the two. The ditch digging is the same. It's basically just the cost of the materials. And even more importantly, in today's, if you're concerned about fire flow and say you'd like to have a fire hydrant in front of your house, but you're on a 4-inch line right now and you could miss the city, well, we don't have enough fire hydrants over here. If it's a 4-inch line, you're out of luck. State regulations will not allow new hydrants to be put in on anything below a 6-inch line. Now, you don't have to go around and abandon your old ones, but I'll guarantee you they will have limited capacity off the 4-inch lines. Now, so we are proposing also, in addition to the 2-inch, that you got a certain amount of very old cast iron lines, mostly a 4-inch size, a couple of 6-inch pieces. Because of their age, we would also propose to include them in the renewals because we feel like that they're mostly up in here and the age they're getting on them. Some of these are paralleled by 2-inch lines, which we'd have to replace these anyway, but the bottom line is they're gonna be 6-inch lines. The one exception is, main exception, there's one small piece over here where we put in a piece of 8-inch, a very small section, but out of the new tower going north, up on Bacon Ridge Road and then back on McKinley, there is some older 2-inch line right now and some 4-inch in here. The records are not totally clear. We would replace all that line, but it would be with an 8-inch line because of the extra capacity that would even give you, come back into town and then we're up down to 6 inches. The tower in this line is what really gives you the bang for the buck in the increased pressures in all this part of town and increased fire flows. You're in pretty good shape down in here. And as you can see, by and large, there's not that much 2-inch line down in here. This is your concentrated area, okay? Like I said, we'd be replacing about half of the system. The newer lines, we're not gonna replace. Anything that's ductile iron, with a couple of exceptions, and is PVC 4-inch with a couple of exceptions where we've got gaps in the bigger lines where it's obvious, hey, if we put in maybe 500 feet here, we can close that gap and increase your pressure. Because the PVC pipe and the newer ductile iron pipe would be left in the system by and large. What's the difference between ductile and wrought iron, cast iron? Cast iron was made first. It is more brittle. It has a tendency to start fracturing quicker. The joints typically are more subject to leaks. And given the age of if you have a lot of this cast iron in the system, back in the day, the pipe was not lined with anything on a cast iron pipe. And that's important because as the system ages, it starts accumulating junk in there. And the junk has a affinity to latch on to the relatively rough inside of the cast iron pipe. Now, about the time they came up with ductile iron, and I'm not a metallurgist, but it has better qualities, resists fractures much better. They also started putting, for ductile iron pipe, a thin coat of, when they make the pipe, a cement mortar lining. That allows the water to go through there better because it's smoother, but it also discourages junk from building up as much. So you can see if you start putting the pieces together, the original system was 4-inch cast mainly and all kinds of junk 2-inch and smaller. Then as it grew out, there was a little period where they were still using cast, but then they switched to ductile on some of these lines and then eventually to PVC. And that's the typical progression. Of course, PVC is lighter, easier, much less costly to put in nowadays, much more smooth inside, doesn't attract the junk near as much. So we would be putting all in new PVC pipe. Okay? Okay. We talked about that and that and that. Okay. Okay, what are the benefits? Well, we talked about that already. We've talked about the wastage of it. We've talked about the maintenance repair costs will tend to go up if we don't do something. We talked about the fire flow improvements. In general, for the older parts of town, roughly 2.5 times more fire flow. 70% of your existing lines, even if you wanted to try and add a fire hydrant on, you can't because they're not 6-inch or bigger. They're the old 4-inch and 2-inch lines. Another couple of things. When we design a system nowadays, we put in significantly more valves in the system. Not at every intersection, at every branch, but typically what you do, you strategically design it. So by shutting off a couple of valves, you limit the outage in an area to maybe 2 or 3 blocks at the most. If you have a dig-in or a break, because you're still gonna have those folks no matter what. Contractors love to dig into utilities. Even if you got a brand new system, you're still gonna have dig-ins. Well, right now, Jim's probably not even sure where all the valves are on the system because they were probably lost through the years and there was no records and they're buried, and if you can find them, they probably don't work. So there's no telling how large an area he may have to shut down when he has a major leak. It could be a huge part of the town. Well, we would fix that problem as part of our improvement. That's not the only reason we're doing it, but it's a added byproduct, okay? Okay, we talked about the standby generator, the new water tower, the better flow, all that. I think we've covered everything else on the first sheet. So those are basically what are the benefits and why are we doing this? And again, I stress the city council is taking a comprehensive approach. Okay, here's the bad part. It's gonna cost money, folks. It's gonna cost money. I won't tell you it's not. And I know people are gonna say, oh my gosh. Just to go ahead and spring it on you, if we do everything we're doing here, it's probably gonna more or less for an average user double your water rates. But this is compared to a 5,000 gallon user, which your average is actually slightly below that, but this is the yardstick the state uses. You're paying a little over $30 a month if you're a 5,000 gallon user. It'll probably go up between $55 to $60 a month. We don't know the exact amount because we don't know how much loan forgiveness we would get from the state. The more we get, the less money we have to borrow, the less. And I can also say this. If you vote to bond issue, you are not committing yourself to a project at that time. You're just basically saying to the city, go ahead and investigate it and see what you can get. If the state comes back and says, well, we don't have as much money as we thought, you're gonna have to borrow the whole amount, they can still back out. You can back out until the very last minute before you actually sign the contract with the contractor, okay? So, but you've gotta have a starting point, an approval point. The council voted in early January, I guess it was, to look at the comprehensive project, and they put $11 million on the bond issue. 11 million. It's a lot of money, folks. But, like I said, it's been at least 40 years since you've had any type of a project that really addressed the needs of your water system. If you built your house 40 years ago, what could you build it for today? Okay? I don't know. Now, the state, and as I said, the state requires us to bond up to the full amount of the. Now, as we have gone through the project and preparing our preliminary engineering report, the good news is we think it's probably going to be more in the nature of about $9.5 million if you had to borrow all the money. Our preliminary estimates appeared to have been just a little high. So we got into more of the detail, and of course, here again, this is still preliminary. About $9.5 million. That's full everything: engineering, construction, contingencies, administration cost. About $9.5 million. So that basically means the 11 million would give you a little bit of a cushion. And let me stress this. So let's say the state comes back and gives you $2 million of loan forgiveness, so what you're actually borrowing is $7.5 million. Your water rates increase that I mentioned are only based on the actual loan amount you have to take out. So you don't pay a water rate based on an $11 million loan. You pay a water rate based on hopefully a 7.5 or less. They've said there could be more money, but don't count on it. But they've pretty well assured us as much as they can at this point, and that's why I'm telling you, though, this is still, you're not bound to this, okay? You're just giving the city authority to proceed with the planning of it at this point. Okay, then you ask the question, well, what about this extra bonded money we voted on? Well, it's in a sense, it's like when you take out, some of you may have taken out HELOCs on your houses, home equity, loan, you establish a credit line is what it does. You only pay the loan on what you borrow. Now, the people will ask, well, what's to keep the city council from deciding to use that money on some other project? Well, that's where you have to tell your city council, you're not gonna do that without the approval of the people. And in fact, a lot of councils are doing this now to reassure the people. They are passing an ordinance which says, and I'm not saying these people have to do this, because they don't, we will not spend any of this unencumbered bond amount without a further approval from the people. In other words, say we come up, we've got $3 million that we could spend on the system, but they still are going to require you people to approve it in a separate account. That's one option. But the bottom line is we have to go for the bigger bond because that's the rule that the state puts on us. Also, in theory, you will see when you read the bond language, because this gets a little complicated if you're not a CPA, okay? From an accounting point of view, you have a combined water and sewer system here. So the bonds will be written, shall they vote water and sewer bonds? But then if you read the language further, it says specifically, but the improvements will be limited to the water system, okay? So this isn't giving them a carte blanche to spend this money on anything else. It has to be spent, no matter how much of it's spent, on the water system only. So you're not giving them authority to run out here and pave roads or put in a new sewer plant or whatever else they think they need. They can't do that. That's against the law, okay? Can't do that. Okay, so we'll be turning in the application in the amount of approximately $9.5 million. We're working, finishing that up, and then it goes to the procedure that I mentioned to you. Loan payments will be based only on the actual amount of the loan. And they do not start until you finish the construction of the project, which is probably at least 2 years out. Now, some cities, once they know they've got the money in hand, they go ahead and stair-step the rate in over, say, maybe a 2-year period, so it's less of an impact at any one time. Other cities choose to defer the whole thing till they actually have to put it in. That's a choice that your city council will have to make. Do they want to stair-step this in, say, $10 a whack? Or do they want to go wait and do it all at one time? They can do it either way. There's pros and cons to both, okay? Like I said, if we do the whole project, which we're recommending, the council wants to do, and we certainly think it's wise, probably your increase would be in the range of $27 to $32 a month. Again, we don't know for sure because we don't know the loan forgiveness, and we don't know the exact interest rate that will be in effect, but we think it will be very close to 1.5%. It does change a few times during the year. Another thing I might point out to you, you have the advantage here in Granby that you do have roughly 900 water users to spread this over, okay? We are working with Golden City, north of you up here, who has, now they've got a smaller system, and they're needing to do a $4 million bond, but because they have so many fewer customers than you, they're gonna be looking at about the same water increase that you are, because they've only got 300 and some customers to spread it on, because that's the way it works. The state makes you spread it evenly among the customers. That way they make sure that everybody pays their fair share every month. So that's typically the way it works. Okay, when we finally get to the point, okay, we've got the money from the state. First, you've all approved the bond issue, we get the assurance from the state, we got the money. Then we draw up plans and specifications, we gotta submit them to the state for approval. That takes a month or 2 or 3, even after we've done the plans. And this is a big project, folks, so it'll take several months for us to do the plans, and, it won't be done in 2 weeks. Once they did all that done, then we get the approvals back, we bid the project. It will be competitively bid, open bid. It will require full bonding and full insurance on the part of the contractor. Some jackleg that's got a backhoe back here and is friends with Ira, not gonna get to work just because he knows Ira and he's got a backhoe. They have to be able to bond the amount of their bids on the project 100%. Of course, first of all, they have to post what's called a bid bond, which is usually either 5 or 10% of the bid. And they have to provide insurance certificates to the city if they're awarded the project, that the lawyer has to approve, so the city's at no risk from insurance on this. The risk is on the contractor and his insurance for things that might happen during the construction. Okay, once that's all done, and we award to what's called the lowest responsive bid. We take bids on this project, we will look at the references. We require these people, if it's some Joe Blow that appears to say that he's got the equipment, but he doesn't have any references, and we can't find anybody to vouch for him, we may not consider that a responsive bid. It just doesn't go to the low bidder. He's got to be the lowest responsible bidder. However, these are bid on a unit price basis, but once the contract is awarded, those prices are locked in. They cannot be increased unless something comes up unforeseen on the project that you didn't see, and it is what we call a change order, which those aren't very many. Occasionally they happen, particularly when you're digging underground in an area where you're not sure it is. But in other words, they can't say, oh, we're halfway into the project and the inflation's going up, I need 10% more of my bid. No, can't do that. Can't do that. They're locked in. And then basically, at the end of the project, you're done, and you start paying for the loan, and that's the hard part. That's all I've got to say, folks. Any questions? I'll be happy to answer them. Any questions of your council people, direct them to them, too. Yes, sir.
All right, I got 3 quick ones.
Okay.
I know when they were installing fiber optic, we had the issue where the contractors weren't insured, or they cut other lines, and people had a nightmare getting that, and I thought the council had trying to require and I don't know if I'm talking apples and oranges, but I know that was an issue with the fiber optic installation throughout the city.
A part of that reason is, and not to disparage fiber optic installers, but because my grandson works for one of them in Springfield, those projects are typically not necessarily funded by these state financing programs, and they could be, I'm not familiar, they may be a little lax on their requirements.
Okay.
But I will guarantee you, even once we've got the bids in hand, before we actually award it, their insurance people, the contractors, must submit, and the project attorney, which will be the law for the city, he will review those, and if they're not right, he won't be awarded the contract. And then it's up to us as a city and the engineers to enforce it. Yeah, people will still try and get away with you know what, but then the burden is on us to make sure, hey, you tore this up over here, you better fix it or get your insurance company to do it. The other thing I would say, of course, we get paid for it, but part of the estimated cost of this is we will provide on-site inspection while the contractor's working, so he can't get away with anything. Now, we would be assisted certainly by your city people, but we as the engineering firm are responsible ultimately to make sure that what was bid gets put in the ground or at least a very close similar, you know, there's always small changes on there,
Sure.
but you understand what I'm saying.
Yes, sir.
We will provide, and that's included already in the cost of this estimate, okay?
Now, the sewer, I know a few years ago with the bond and stuff, and we were gonna get a pay raise on the sewer, where are we at with the sewer?
I will have to defer to your council people,
Okay.
I do not know.
We'll do that. And then, I live on Tower Road, or Bacon Ridge Road, I'm right next to the city well.
Yes.
Where is that tower gonna go? Inside the chain link on there?
Well, it will go, we haven't made.
I have an acre right next to
Yeah.
the city well. That's my problem.
Okay, no, it's our envision, it will go on property that the city already owns,
Okay.
or if we couldn't fit it in there, and we haven't got to that detailed design yet, if they needed more property, they would have to negotiate. Now, we're not gonna condemn anybody for anything on this project.
Right.
Technically, the city has power to condemn. That is an absolute last resort. You don't wanna do that unless, so, yes, we want to get it as close to the well as we can. So, yeah.
You have a big area that's around that water.
Well, Arnold's on the other side of it.
Mhm.
So
so-
it could fit in that area?
Well, again, I'll be the first to say, we haven't gone to detailed design yet because but the assumption is that, you know, water towers, if you look at it, the base isn't that big.
Right.
So, and there is no restriction of how far apart. In fact, we would prefer that the tower be as absolutely as close to the well as you can get it. That way you pump right into it.
Tornado siren, you got the police
Yeah.
tower there.
Yeah,
and
you've
then the
got
well.
all
Yeah,
of that.
so we would have to work with all that in the city, so, like I said, but we are envisioning that we will put it on property we have. If we had to acquire a little more, we would certainly have to pay fair market value for it, but our intention is to put it where it's at. Is that correct, Ira?
Yeah, we were just looking at Google Earth, and it appears there's plenty of.
Okay,
out there.
good. Thank goodness for Google Earth.
Depending on when it was done.
Well, that's true.
My dad's still on there and he's been dead 10 years.
Oh, no. Any other questions, folks? You've been very
The,
attentive.
To answer your question, Christian, on the sewer project,
Yes,
because the bids came in higher than what was proposed, basically it's back in the hands of the people that are taking care of the financing. Correct me, Gene, if I'm wrong, to revisit that.
You're correct.
Let me add this to that too. I know exactly what you all are going through on that. We have a client, Southwest City, and it's almost a parallel situation. For whatever reason, we started the planning on that water project before COVID. We got the initial funding from the same sources that these folks are using for their sewer project before COVID. Well, actually, it was 2 months after it started, but you know, no one foresaw the increased, and I don't want to cast stones at anybody, but the obscenely high price increases that have occurred since then, okay? Southwest Cities in the same, actually, they can't get any more funding. They can borrow a little more money, so they're gonna have to go back, and they're in the process of cutting a lot of stuff out. We had to make some tough decisions. And then, of course, we still have to rebid the project. Now, in preparing these estimates, we have tried to take into account what are the current post-COVID price trends we see. And we are comfortable with them, but I still have to give a disclaimer, you know, what may come down the pike a year from now that messes everything up. I will say I have, in all the years I've been doing this, I've never seen the type of price increases that happened before pre-COVID and I mean, even when we do a project, we know we're a couple of years out from actual construction, so we try and put in a reasonable allowance for cost increases so we don't have this problem. And in all the years I worked in this business till this COVID, I've only had 1 or 2 projects that we actually didn't have enough money, but we were able to scrounge up. But this is a very volatile world, folks, and we've done our best to make sure that we have good, and it may well be that when we take bids for this, maybe it'll come in at $8 million. But I don't want to lead you astray and say it's gonna be this. Now, is it gonna be 9.5? No, it could be 10 or 10.5, again, because of the volatility of it. But we believe from what we're seeing that prices are tending to stabilize now. Would you agree with that, Jeff?
Yeah, I mean, materials are starting to become more available and
See, that was the other thing. We had this alleged material shortage, and again, I'm not casting aspersions, but, you know, people tell you, I can't get this for 6 months. Why? What did COVID have to do with that? But that's what people are being told. Hey, my daughter is trying to wait on a part for a lawnmower that it's been 6 months getting, and the repair shop finally said, we're tired of waiting for our supplier, we're gonna go to a machine shop and we'll build it for you at the same price we quoted. Now, folks, why does it take 6 months to get a repair part for a lawnmower?
Because the boats are stuck out there in the ocean still. That's what they tell us.
But again, two things. Prices do change, but we have done our very best to try and think what have allowed for. If we'd been doing this 3 years ago, I'll guarantee you this estimate wouldn't be anywhere near 9.5 million. It would probably have been 6 to 7. Okay.
Seems like we should have done it 2 or 3 years
And that's honestly why.
And of
as a
course, that's
council-
another reason why if you put it off another 2 or 3 years,
Right.
like I said, this is an opportunity to fix your system at a locked-in price. Yes, no one likes paying that much more money a month for your water bill, but
But won't your water bill still be based on what you use?
yes, but
I mean, like I'm an old lady all by myself and don't use that much.
but you will be charged the same loan amount because it's charged equally to every user. Now, your bill still has a component of usage, yeah, so the more water you use, the more ultimately higher your bill is. But everybody will see their base bill go up by the same amount.
Say water share with a friend.
Yes, ma'am.
So when this project's completed, are there gonna be records, like when 20 years from now,
Oh.
the line breaks, everybody's gonna know?
Absolutely, no. Part of what we do at the end of this project, we and the contractor keeps records of everything that he does, and
Have a map.
and then we prepare what's called record drawings, which accurately, to the best of everybody's knowledge, shows exactly what went in where, and those maps are given to the city. Now, another thing I would recommend highly, and it's not part of this project, but it's getting very much easier to get done nowadays. Most cities have gone to now these GIS-based systems where they've got really good maps of their sewers and waters. And those have got to the point that they probably aren't that expensive to get done.
Yes, so the nice thing about GIS mapping is you can start at a base level and build from there. You don't have to do everything all at once, but, you know, you can actually survey the location of water meters and valves and your manholes in the system. And so when you draw the lines in the GIS, then they are exactly where they are because those items were surveyed, right? So
I would recommend highly that once the project is done, the city invest, and we're only talking, what, a few, no more than 10 grand probably?
And the MRWA helps with that.
Yes, and in fact, one of the good sources is Missouri Rural Water Association. We worked with the folks down in Newton County in one of the water districts a couple of years ago, and they did that at the end of the project and got it done for a very reasonable. Now, from that point on, it's still up to your city people to keep that updated. It doesn't update itself, but it gives you an excellent basis to start from. But that's why I think I would wait until you did the project, then you can do it, and then see, then you're caught up, then you go from there. Good point.
One question, but I expect this will go to Jim, not to you. Okay, so I've studied the map and everything, just curiosity, what size and type of line runs down Tower Road and City Limit Road?
6 inch.
Yes, I want to commend whoever was in charge when those lines were put in, they did the right thing. There is a complete
Well, I think
6-inch
it's
loop
newer.
out
I
there.
think it's a newer
Yeah.
line now.
Yeah.
And because of that, we're not having to replace any of those lines out there.
We got fire hydrants.
Yeah, and as close as you are to the tower, you've got good fire flow out there. there's no doubt about it,
I
but,
didn't know, that's why I wondered, we got good flow at the house.
yeah, you're in great shape.
What type of, is it PVC line?
Yep. Mhm. No, I don't know who was in charge of that, but they made the right decision when that line was put in, so I commend them. Yes, sir.
So how much will this raise the water pressure in this town?
Well, that will depend on your location and your elevation, but probably, at least, well, it's obviously, if you're close to the existing tower, it's not gonna raise it any because the two towers will match. But as you go out into the system and your elevation changes, there are places where it'll raise it 15 to 20 pounds because now you've got such small lines and such leakage.
That pressure is terrible.
Where do you live?
I live on Williams Road.
Right by the church.
Where?
Well, Williams Road in West New York.
By the tower.
Yeah, right by the tower.
Now, okay, I can't explain that.
It takes a half an hour to fill a washing machine.
I cannot, unless they've got a very small,
What you wanna do, and Jim can probably help you with this, you need to go out to your water meter and take your meter out and put a hose bib on it and see if you're getting quantity of water there. You may have an issue from the meter into your house because you've got little bitty lines or maybe galvanized.
they're,
Over the years, but if you're at the tower and you're at a decent elevation, you should
Okay.
be getting some.
but I know from looking at all these maps and records, there is some confusion. There is a line showed out there that is on Williams Road that may be a 2-inch line or it may be smaller.
I'm seeing on this map, it looks like there's a small line out there in that area.
So, and again, when we go to the detailed design, we will look at those specifics and, because our intention of, oh yeah, that should not be happening.
It's been that way since the 70s.
Well, then that's telling me that small line that they ran out there, because see, that 8-inch line goes right by your house.
Yeah, that was one where it was never tied to the 8-inch.
Okay, it was never tied in, there you go.
Carol, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, it shows on here that it's a service tie over to an existing 2-inch line, right where we live.
Yep,
We
so,
have the same problem.
Yeah, we sure do.
yeah, but, and why they didn't do that, I have no idea. When Jim told me that, I'm going,
Yeah, I think that's
What?
the problem, right there, it's across the.
what? Any other questions, folks? You've been such an excellent audience. Yes, sir.
My question was on our, said our water was probably double the price. What's that going to do to our sewer council? Since that's based on how much water we use.
No. The sewer portion of your bill is based on 2 parts.
How much water you use?
Yes, but that doesn't have to go, because it has its own incremental charge, and unless they change that sewer rate charge, your water usage per gallon should stay the same. For it to go up, they would have to make a change in your sewer rates, and that is not part of this project. It will not affect your sewer rates. Or, as some people say too, well, it's gonna raise my city taxes. No, these are revenue bonds, which are supported by the revenue from the utility involved. Now, some cities do pass what's called general obligation bonds, which are tied to some type of a sales tax or property tax. Not many, some do. We are not doing this here, and I think that, and most people don't, because they say the people using the product, whether it's water or sewer, ultimately should be the ones that are paying for it, and not, now, the plus side of that is, and we do have one community north of here we're working with, if you do a sales tax, of course, it impacts you whether you're using any water or not, because you still gotta go to the store and buy the stuff. But I guess it does if there's folks who live out of town coming in town and shop, they're paying too, but that's not a good reason to do that. It is a revenue bond, and it will be paid for by revenues from the water system only, not the sewer system, not any taxes, okay?
You said $55, $60 would be the water rate there?
Well, the incremental rate would be approximately $27 to $32 added on to whatever you're paying right now. So if you're paying $20 a month now, it might go up to $50. If you're paying 10, or if you're paying 50, it'll go up to $80. probably around, is it around $20? I've looked at that, but I don't remember. So yeah, your water bill will still be influenced by how much water you use, but it will go up. But
Pretty well, previously it said that minimum, in order to get free money or get grants or whatever, you have to use for what, $54 each.
well, if we get the funding that we think is the package, that is correct. If you're paying, well, it probably wouldn't, if you're paying the minimum now, and we put 25 to 30 on there, it's gonna get you up, do the math, 45 to 50. So, but, 25 to 30, 32 at the highest. These are estimates, but they're good ballpark estimates. They should not go beyond that by any means. And if we can get more loan forgiveness, they could come in less. But I can't promise you that. Nobody can.
And in order to qualify, we have to be at that MHI. We can't even apply for grants to get free money without being at that point for you guys.
That's basically correct. There is a little fluff in that, but given the cost of your projects, you will be at the 2% number, which we won't get into that. But that basically would raise your rates, your base rate double, because right now you're slightly over 1%. And let me say this to that, just as again, the state of Missouri position is that it is reasonable to expect that a water user in the state of Missouri or a sewer user, either one, should be able, or the city can charge and still be reasonable and affordable up to 2% of your minimum household income. Now, fortunately for you people in Granby, your MHI right now is pretty low. It's only $34,000 plus a year. Right now, if you do the math, the average 5,000 gallon bill is paying about 1% of that, which is $30-some a month for an average use. If your MHI was 50,000 a year, they would expect you to kick in even more. So you've got two things going for you down here, which you're probably not going to get a better deal anyway right now. Your MHIs are still low. You've got some poverty issues here. And you've got a pretty good sized customer base, 900 or so customers. Those are both in your favor.
Well, it's also in your favor that once you get a good water system, it makes it more attractive to be here.
That's true.
People are more willing to build something.
And let me say this about that, and again, nobody can say what'll happen. But if between you keep your water system and your sewer system in good shape, and you do attract growth, as you start getting more customers, you're collecting more money a month. At that point in time, the council has options. Do we keep paying the same amount? Or do we cut the rate because all we've got is, or do we prepay the rate and save the city some interest in the long run? Those are options that the city council would make, Yes, ma'am.
Well, we're kind of battling it out here, and he's probably right, but maybe I missed something when I went to the restroom, but what about the people who move here, and they're like, oh my gosh, do they have to pay something, like when they turn their water on, and then they get this, and they're like, wow, this is a lot higher, or?
Everybody will pay the same.
People, I'm saying that.
When they come in, whatever the rate is, they pay it. So they're going to be paying for the loan, yes, because that's going to be ground into the rates from that day for at least the next 30 years, unless you can lower it and convince the people you've got more people coming in. And because the main thing the state wants to make sure is you've got enough money coming in every month to make your loan payment.
Okay, then say, what if we got these younger folks that say, oh, good Lord, I don't want to pay this, so I'm moving out and going somewhere else and get out of our city limits? What does that do to the public?
Well, obviously, if you lose enough customers, you start having a problem. But let me say that to them. Where are they going to go to find a significantly cheaper rate? You hear that argument, but you start looking at rates everywhere else. Everywhere they're going up. Some more than others. I won't say you're going to have either the highest rate or the lowest rate, because I haven't done an exhaustive rating. But I hear that argument, well, people's just going to leave town. Well, where are they going to go? Because they still got to have water and they got to have sewer. And if they're just gonna go out in the country, let them see how much today it costs them to drill a private well and a private sewer system. That's the real kicker. People can't afford that just to get away from, well, I'm gonna move out in the county because your water rates are too high here. I mean, if you can afford to do that, you can afford to pay the $30 a month to the
But
city.
there are such people.
There are such people, I will give you that. Exactly,
And they
no.
don't think about that when they run off, just, you know, like, well, you know.
The other thing,
You have people that just, they don't have indoor plumbing. I mean.
I know,
you all spec
I know.
people, so it's just-
And of course, here I am, this is another thing to consider. People buy this bottle of water, and here I am sucking on it, and this is a terrible example. You figure what the cost per 1,000 gallons of this is compared to what you're paying, even with the increase. And the other thing is, yes, a lot of these people will complain, but how many of them are paying for cell phones with the best top-of-the-line coverage, and either satellite or cable TV that are probably paying a lot more money from that than they're gonna be paying for their water bill? Again, it's a matter of perspective. Can you get by without cell phones? Well, maybe not. Can you get by without satellite TV? Well, if you had to, you could. Can you get by without water? No. So if you hear people saying that, you might just kind of gently say, what are you paying for your cell phone coverage or your satellite TV coverage? Or if you're addicted to the vices of smoking or drinking, and I'm not gonna moralize, but hey, you talk about cost increases. I can't believe what a carton of cigarettes cost today, because my mother-in-law was a heavy smoker and she didn't pay near that much for it 30 years ago.
Will this make the water taste any better? My husband worked for the Rural Water Company in Iola, Kansas, and we'd come down here, he's passed away. He wouldn't drink the Granby water.
Oh my gosh, I think we have some of the best tasting.
Okay, I have heard no other complaints, but the answer is, I have heard no complaints that you've got bad water, but there could be a little increase of quality because you may be getting rid of some of these old pipes that have got some gunk in them. But normally, your taste and odor issues come from the source water that's coming out of your well.
Well, I drank it, but he wouldn't.
But most, yeah, really, in most parts of where we're at here, we are blessed with good quality water because of the limestone aquifer. Yes, ma'am.
Live on Baker Ridge Road, as he was saying, and we have a little filter on our sink, and it is full of rust. And I mean, just full of it. So if that, you know,
Okay.
takes that away.
Okay, the only caveat to that is, this program will not address the line from the meter to your house. That is owned by the property owner, the city has nothing to do with that. If that line is rusty, then it won't solve that problem. It's up to you to replace that line. We will replace every bad junk stuff from up to the meter, but we don't touch the meter in. That's private property. So,
Pat, I had a question. You know, we're talking about replacing 46% of the pipe. What about the other 54%?
it's newer pipe, it's newer 4-inch. We are leaving some of the 4-inch PVC pipe in, even though it's not the size we put, but it is newer pipe, and there's not a cost-benefit ratio to the small amount you have in. The rest of it is basically 6-inch, either ductile iron. Some of the 4-inch is also ductile, a little bit, not much. All of the 6-inch, with the exception of a couple of blocks over here on the old Hart downtown, is all either appears to be ductile iron or PVC. Most of the 6-inch is new PVC. The 8-inch line you had put in the ground some years ago from the tower appears to be 8-inch ductile, but it's still in good shape because basically anything that is ductile iron or PVC from that age on has not reached the end of its useful life, and you're wasting your money to put that in. So about half of your system is fine. It's this other half that's not. Right.
See, when the new gets put in, you're gonna find out where you missed that.
Well, that's probably true, because It wouldn't, yeah, there's an element of uncertainty when you're dealing with an old system. I'll be the first to admit it. But you can't afford to replace everything. You just can't, and there's no need to, I mean, let's face it.
Pat?
Yes,
what
sir.
What was the price, can you recall, on replacing the entire system? Was it 17 million?
Oh, goodness gracious, it would have been, well, you can just, well, you wouldn't have the tower to double, but you take about 2 million or so, yeah, it'd be about 17 or 18 million, it'd be in that range.
All right.
Yeah, yeah. Yes, sir.
Well, I heard you earlier, you went ahead and quoted what you call the Olson report. That was from 2013 to 2014. It was losing 62% of the water. And pretty well what the price was $750,000 for a water tank, $220,000 to fix the pipes, for a total of $970,000. The quote that you're coming up with 10 years later is pretty well 10 times that.
Well, I would have to go back and look at that report, but I don't recall those low of numbers, and I don't want to get in an argument with you, and I don't have the report with me. All I'm saying is, and I don't vouch for anything of the accuracy of the Olson report, because quite frankly, a lot of it was not correct. And again, I'm not casting aspersions on who made it, but in looking at it now, it's obvious they had some wrong assumptions, they had wrong this, all I'm saying is, these costs are based on what we think are current market reliable trends. We didn't use some report from X years ago and say, well, that was good then, we'll just increase it 10 or 15%. No. So again, I can't speak to the exact numbers, although it appears to the face of me, I think they had a water tank in there for. Now, the Olson report, I do know this, was not recommending near the level of replacement because they had the erroneous statement in their report that virtually all of your pipes had been replaced in 1980. I don't know where they got that from, but that is not right. As I said, there was some limited replacement of 4-inch lines with 4-inch PVC in 1980. It's a very small percentage of your system. Where they got that information from, I do not know, but it was not right.
It also said the sewer system was 100 years old.
Well, the big thing, though, to remember is when you guys brought this information to us, as a council, we looked over the sections. You guys said you could just put in a tower and be able to have that emergency usage and you'll be just fine. But that's not what we see the citizens wanting. We've seen the citizens, they're upset about the broken lines all the time. They're upset about the pressure. And if, as a council, if we're willing to stop kicking the can down the road, we want to do it right. And
Just like what we went through the day before yesterday. That was on an 1.25 inch line, and there's a 4-inch on this side of the road.
yeah, and you're talking about a brand new business. These people just bought my business, came in and didn't have water. Couldn't figure out why. Because we have lines running, you know, with each other and they're hooked up wrong. I mean, and they just get into our town to start their business, and then ones next door couldn't even open because they didn't have water to do their dishes and do their food. And so these are the things that hurts us exponentially. It's hurting our sales base, our sales taxes. It's hurting people from wanting to come in and set things up. This kind of stuff helps you all around. Yes, it's going to cost us as citizens. I'm not thrilled about having to pay more. I would love to figure out a way so that it doesn't cost us as much. And as this council, I think we're working very hard to look as many options as possible. However, in order to do this, this is what has to be done. I mean, we just have to bite that bullet and make those hard decisions. We want to see it fixed all around.
I wanted to make a comment. Jimmy made a comment earlier, I think it was overspoken by that, I don't think you heard it, but this gentleman just reinforced it. So 10 years ago, you had a tower price of $750,000, if that was right. And obviously the repairs weren't the same, but just comparing the tower to the tower in 10 years is more than double.
Yeah, right
No,
now,
and it's just
we're estimating this
exactly
new
what's
tower
gonna happen.
will go, my estimate may be a little high, but I'd rather be a little high than a little low. It's probably gonna be closer to $2 million.
But that's the decision the council made. They're saying, okay, we can kick the can down the road and do a little bit of repairs, it's just gonna get more and more expensive, and so they said, let's just bite the bullet and let's go for it. And from the funding cycle, like I say, I've been doing this, not quite as long as Pat, but I've been doing it for 35 years, and when I got into this in the late 80s, the government funding used to be handing out dollars all over the place. That's true. They were doing sewer systems that were 90% grants, 90% grants. We put in several of them. That money dried up, and I haven't seen grant dollars like what's out in the pipe right now since that time. So there's more funding dollars floating around out there, and there's more requirements to get it spent in a hurry, and I think this is one of the best times to be applying for funding for projects. So, you know, if you're gonna go for it all, which is the decision the board wanted it to do, it's the best time to do it, because I think you can leverage so much more of your money and get so much more bang for your buck, and be done with this for years to come. It won't ever affect us again in our lifetime, so I commend the council for what they're doing.
Because all you're gonna have left in is newer ductile iron pipe and newer PVC pipe, and half of it's gonna be brand new. So, I'm not saying things won't go wrong, because never say never, but.
I don't think it's a want, it's a need. We need to have this completed.
It's definitely.
If we keep kicking this can down the road, one day it's gonna totally fail on us, and then what are we gonna pay to fix it?
We was in discussion of it back with the previous administration, and then we got hit with the EPA sewer issue. We had no choice on what to do there. And that's what killed it. I mean, it just.
I think this is a positive move forward for any kind of growth, whether it be a housing development, or somebody buying a piece of property, adding some houses, business, even a plant requires water and sewer.
Is this water report, is that was paid for by a grant here?
Yes.
So essentially it's paid for, correct?
Yes.
Already. Well, I have a question, if, essentially, you know, contrary to talk about all the options here, if you were to invite essentially a public utility company to come in, would they be able to go ahead and look at your, engineering project, come up with a bid, you know, for how much to pay for that without essentially?
You're not gonna be able to get a public water company to come in and purchase it because of what we have. They're gonna lose money trying to upgrade
Maybe.
everything. No,
Maybe.
it's already been looked at.
Well, then
It's-
maybe you go ahead and have some of them come in. I
They
would
have.
pretty
Haven't
much,
you guys had somebody come and talk to you before? Maybe
back in
previous.
2015.
Maybe it was.
Missouri American.
I don't recall, but it possibly could
I
be.
recall because it was my son that
Okay.
came in for Missouri American Water.
Yeah.
He said they do not come in here and buy our water system and replace it and make money. Our water system is so bad that they have to go through and replace so much, and at that time, he said if they came in and bought it, it's gonna triple your water bill.
Something else too with that,
Maybe they should be
just like right now,
given
Joplin's going through a
They don't want it.
$770 million
I don't know that.
deal, which is American Water, and they're talking about a rate increase. American Water rate increase will be across the state of Missouri.
Yeah.
So we would be paying for, or not we, I know it's not town, but just your water bill would be increased to pay for Joplin improvements, or Springfield improvements, St. Louis improvements.
The bottom line is, if any
Publicly
company
traded
comes in
company.
here and buys your water system, they are a business. They are in business to make money.
Make money.
The city is trying to provide water at cost and maintenance built in. There's no way you're gonna get it cheaper. There's no way, I'm sorry.
It's a publicly traded company. If you look it up, that I sent you that information, Martin, that it's a publicly traded company.
You made it quite clear
Mhm.
that none of you have any intention of essentially imbibing some public water.
Because we're not gonna
Nope.
allow
Because we
the
do not
revenue
want
that
to
we
sell it.
receive from the water to go somewhere else. We're gonna leave that revenue in our town, and that is going to pay for that.
And the people will make that choice. Once again, guys, we're not trying to sell you anything or try to get you to buy anything from us. We're putting it out there. They're telling us it's gonna cost us $9.5 million. We want to make sure there's a cushion. We don't want to have to go back and beg for money or make any mistakes. We're asking for an $11 million bond. And so it's up to you guys to make that choice. If you want us to fix your water system, we can do it. You just have to vote that bond in. That's really all it boils down to is it's the citizens' choice, and that's what we're doing. That's all we're doing.
We're gonna bring this meeting to a close and, try to encourage your neighbors and such to come out, on March the 16th, which is also a Thursday at 6 o'clock. Any more questions you might come up with? You may have heard some things that just stimulated a thought that you may bring in the next time. But again, I just want to say that we appreciate you guys coming and putting forth some great questions for our friends at Anderson. And together, we'll get something accomplished for the good of the town. Council, do you have any other questions, any things to say before we dismiss?
Nope.
We will consider this dismissed at 7:30. Thanks, guys.
I want something to announce.